the animal. You find the animal. We're not going to do that, obviously, but we're going to learn from some of the signs and their indicators, they're called, and of what animals they are. And through a process of elimination, you can just discern which ones they are, such as how many toes do they have. And there in the middle, you see a critter with 5 toes on each foot. So that kind of narrows it down to who it is. But let's move on. Oh, I'm having trouble. There we go. Okay, so the first one here is the tracks that you see in the sand are actually 100%. If you see them and you're familiar with them, you know exactly who it is. And the tracks on the right side are actually this animal, the same tracks, but they're, sorry, I'm trying to, it's a funny way that this animal will walk, is that the biggest of the tracks in the sets, the largest footprint is the front foot, followed by the back foot. And you'll notice that the front feet are always on the left side here, and the back foot is registering forward of the front foot on the right side. And so it's walking sideways. And it has this telltale sign, it's called the chevron in the front foot. I don't know if you see my cursor there. And then also the scat. I spared you. I don't have lots of pictures of scat, which I normally would. But this one animal is really particular about placing scat. It's called scent posting, but like placing it on rocks and really going out of its way to do it, very obviously. And so then there's this den, and then there's also a cache of a half-eaten rabbit there. So if you haven't guessed it, this front footprint really gives it away, and it's a red fox. And so red fox is established here. Actually, it was believed that we exterminated red fox through the 1600s into the 1700s. The British brought their red fox, same Vulpes vulpes, over, and it is believed by some that our populations of red fox here in the Northeast are all descendant from the English red foxes that were brought here. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. So you see the one is kind of nonchalantly coming up on 2 turkeys. And who do you think, what do you think happened there? So red fox are very much accustomed to humans. And so they are comfortable living around humans. They have this wonderful pelage, this pelt that you see when it's red like that. The black socks are very telltale for it. The front, we call them black socks, and the ears. It also has a sharper snout than the next one we'll see. And there's always a white tip on the tail, but in nature, you tend to avoid saying always or never. And one time in the backyard, a red fox showed up, and it didn't have a white tip on its tail. And the reason was it was broken off. It was bitten off somehow, but it was actually removed. So their tails are very fluffy, and you can see the one sleeping there, it's wrapped its tail in to help it keep warm. And the one where it's the same fox has been woken up, its tail is kind of tucked between its leg, and it's all about staying warm. It's in the dunes, in the lee side, out of the wind, and in the sun, and basking in nice warmth. So they have kits, about 4 in a litter, 3 in a litter. And again, they can den underground, also under your shed, under buildings, right in your backyard, because they're very accustomed to us now. So the next one would be a gray fox. This is a stock image. Gray fox is a little smaller. They're both about 14 pounds, but a little stockier and not as lean, tall, if you will. It has a grizzled fur and no white tip on its tail. It also has a shorter snout to it. And it does have I believe they're semi-retractable claws, and it can climb a tree. Now it climbs up that way and it has to climb down that way. So it's not a fast climber, Don't tell red fox she can't climb, because we know that red fox gets up on the tops of sheds, on cars. My sister has a photo of red fox sleeping on the roof of a car on Commercial Street in Provincetown. And when the cottages out on North Beach, we would it was often to see in the wintertime red fox snoozing on the roofs, catching the sun out of the wind. The difference here with gray fox is that it's more of an omnivore. And don't tell the animals that, because they don't read the literature on themselves. And they're opportunistic, which means they eat virtually whatever comes along, but they can be particular depending on the season. The little kits there, you see the one to the right, it does have kind of black socks, but it does have a shorter snout. And if we had the two kits, red fox and gray fox, compared, you'd see a distinction. They den under logs, under abandoned buildings. They're not so comfortable amongst us, but they don't really dig dens. They live under like brush piles and such. But they are here on the Cape. I haven't particularly seen them on Cape. I've known of sightings. They're generally in the forested areas, tree canopy, mixed forest. And so Truro was a place, Wellfleet Truro, the National Seashore, is a place they've been seen. So with this sign, again, sign was my fascination. I don't like to take pictures of animals so much. I just like to look at them and watch them. But the two tracks, sets of tracks on the left, are from the same species of animal, but registered in a different way. And so the top one in the left, nice and round, very symmetrical. It's almost pretty, I think. It's a very symmetrical. And then the one below is more lance-like, like a pike of a pole with the European weapons in the 16th century with a steel point on the top. And so sometimes they'll register more like that. And also in the bottom one, you'll see the two front claws are registering. Again, the front foot is larger than the back. And in these two prints, the front foot and the bottom one, the back foot is registering forward of the front, and the other way, the top one, it's the opposite. So it's about their gait. This animal will go sideways as well. So the next one on the left, the tall one, this is an animal that is in a very fast trot. You can see the distance between the tracks, but there's two footprints in each track. So it's a four-legged animal making a single line track. And it's moving front, and the corresponding back foot is coming into that front foot track. And so it's moving along at a pretty good clip. The next one heading right this is Long Nook. The previous one is out on the Marsh Trail at Sandy Neck. And here you'll see a little bit of a gap between the two sets of prints. You have, it's actually front, back, airborne, front, back, airborne, front, back, born. And there's a little side swing to it. And it's moving not on the road, because in the sand, it's easier on the feet, but also at the foredune, this is a chance for it to flush out animals that are like meadow voles and such. The tracks to the right are when this animal is at its fastest run. It's front airborne. You see the great distance between the sets, the groups of four. And this animal is hustling down the trail. And this again was on Sandy Neck. And of course, it's the eastern coyote. This is Chatham. Again, this animal is in the nice grass and the foredune, inside on the lee side of the dune and facing the sun. That's out of the wind. This is my sister, Tammy Fulcher, who took this. And if you look at the next one, you see some clear body language in the laying down animal, that it's actually kind of fluffing its jowls there. It's doing kind of a ruff, ruff thing. Ears are back, and it's either fight or flight. And what it did is it took off and ran, which you're seeing in the smaller image. So this animal would be considered more of a blonde coyote, whereas the other picture to the right is another coyote with that more grizzled look like the gray fox had. Again, no white tip, and their tails don't tend to be as puffy as foxtails. Some of the interesting sign that coyotes do, they're all around. These are all in Chatham, different sites. This is a behavior. If you look at the tracks, it's like, what? Well, how many coyotes are there? Is there 20 coyotes or something? And this is a behavior where they come down. This is a nice hollow. It's actually vernal pools, designated a vernal pool, high bankings around it, a lot of pitch pines. The conifers keep their green, and it kind of retains heat. And they're standing there standing and hugging, pacing around and keeping warm, and then moving on. So there's actually in a cluster is what they're doing here. And it's about staying warm and resting. They're not laying down, they're standing. And they're kind of, snuggling up to each other, standing and pacing around. The two photos to the right are another spot in Chatham. And this is an example of there are actually two animals walking in the same track footprints. So it's the front, they're the front in front of another animal following right behind. And that's what the animals like us, if we walk in heavy snow, we will put our feet or footprints are in the soft sand. We step in the person who's walking, the prints of the person that's walking in front of us. So it's about energy conservation. So another way in their dens, they'll hollow out fox dens, but these dens are really unique in that they are subject to high tide. So the one on the left is actually a Coast Guard beach, Eastham, and behind the grass there is the den. And the other one is actually at Aries Pond, South Orleans. And you'll find this all along. The Bass River used to have them at the Indian lands. Just because of us, they move on. But you can see that the roots are wet. So this chamber goes in, kind of down, and then back up into a deeper chamber and goes up. So the high tide actually comes in and enters this den. So it's a way of protection, being safe. Another thing of coyotes is that they do have the crushing power in their jaw to break the bones of deer, and then other animals will come and work on the bone for calcium in the winter, like little mice. But it's this fur, I call it a fur plucking party. It's like you'll see multiple spots where it's just fur, and they'll actually sit down and they'll pluck the fur out because they eat the skin. Skin is fat. We all need fat in our diet. Unfortunately, we have not good fat, but you won't find any bones in that fur. It'll all be just fur. And they do eat some of the fur, because we found some the other day that showed that wasn't typically it wraps around the scat when they're wrapping the bones, so that they, in their movements, it helps protect their digestive tract. So who are they chasing? That nice print that I had in the beginning, the spear shaped, was the coyote came. I took these photos one day. This is in Harwich off the bike trail, and I didn't have a camera. I came back, took these pictures. They're still as dark and as moist as they are. And the bonus was that coyote track was amongst it. So the coyote had come in after. But these deer tracks, gave it away. If you hadn't figured out, it's a hooved animal, and it's registering on the left. It's registering the dew claws. So that's either due to soft sand or due to movement. And these animals are moving pretty well. They're moving along at a pretty good pace. And when I came to these tracks, I was probably not more than 2 hours behind their passing through. And then the other with the Phragmites, that's at Chatham, and they'll make their trails right through it. They'll do the same with briars, green briars. They'll chew them, and so of course it's deer. The doe on the left to come out her winter, you can see her ribs. They're coming into their summer coats, and the buck on the right is going into winter. He's already lost his velvet, has grown his new antlers. Deer can live just fine amongst us. Our yards, especially the empty yards during the winter, provide safety, potential for food sources, although can be limited. And the bucks are more elusive. They tend to go off on their own, where the females will stay together in groups where they're related. The mother doe and her yearlings and this year's fawns. So there's a young buck in probably July or August. and he's got the velvet. He's grown his antlers back. They drop them in February and regrow them. They're actually quite mushy right there. If you could go up there and squeeze his antlers, it would be squishy. And as the summer turns into fall, they go into the rut. This is the tree there is actually small swamp turo, and they're rutting. They're rutting they're rubbing the flesh off the bone, and the rutting is that they're scraping up ground and saturating it with hormonal laden urine, and that's all in the process of mating. And yes, you can tell the difference between doe and buck pellet scat, and that's a doe. So browsing in the wintertime, food sources are lean. Deers, their metabolisms, all these animals, their metabolisms change predominantly. Most animals. Where like with deer, they browse on, this is an apple tree, and they browse, actually this animal is browsed on it, not the deer, but the deer will do that on fruit trees, on poison ivy. And so their diets have changed. And there was a time when a few years back, when some people felt bad for deer in New Hampshire, and they fed them processed food, and all the deer died because they couldn't digest the food. Their metabolisms have geared toward winter. So again, back to this animal, also browses, and it has a telltale print right there, the track cluster. It's going forward, so it's going from bottom to the top. And so it's front, and then the back too, and then it bounds. And then the ice picture is back at Chatham as well, only it's going the other direction. And of course, it's our rabbit. Eastern cottontail is new to New England. It's brought here in the turn of the 1900s for hunting. Our rabbit is New England cottontail. We're also supposed to have snowshoe hare on Cape Cod. Never seen it on Cape Cod, certainly north of us. But the New England cottontail is, their numbers, they're a species, and a threatened species because of loss of habitat. They need more thicket and brush. And if you look at the eyes, that's part of the difference. The New England cottontail has a greater visibility of predators, so it'll be out in the open grass, whereas that's the Eastern cottontail. The New England cottontail will be out at the beaches. Brewster is, for the lower Cape, Brewster is a place where there still remains. And Division of Fishery and Wildlife are trying to establish designated habitats. Mashpee is the place they've concentrated the most for our New England cottontail. So we do still have them both. Supposedly our snowshoe hare, and there's a black jackrabbit on Nantucket, supposedly. Don't know that for sure. So habitat is again where, so this tree, we would be tending to cut it down, but it has a tremendous value for multiple life because of the size of the opening. If the top wasn't opened up, the inside would be great for owls, like little screech owls. The height of that hole would have been perfect. But because the top's open, they're not going to use it. Instead, the critter that left these tracks is in that tree at the time of this photo. And this is one of my favorite jaunts. This is again Sandy Neck, the Marsh Trail, 3 miles down the neck to this tree. And you pretty much have to walk there to get to it. But this, you're seeing the front, on the left, you're seeing the front foot of this animal, and on the right, you're seeing the back foot of the animal. So this is a pacer. It walks like a bear. The left front comes down, of course, the right back comes next to it. And so it's a raccoon. Hey. And you see on the bottom left, a stock image, see how long and his bulbous long fingers. They have real extra sensory receptors, in their forepaws. So they have great dexterity, so they can untie stuff, open your Tupperware. I joked at Nickerson where they knew how to get into, they knew where the good victuals were, so they knew how to get into it. And they're very alert, very curious, and again, with great dexterity. They can swim. They do go down into holes in grounds. They don't dig that. Generally, they like to be in trees. And so the one tall photo toward the right, you see 2 raccoons kind of snuggled up in the tree. That's a cottonwood tree in East Harwich. And it's the wintertime during the day as they're snoozing. And then on the right, you see it's like a little trail of happy raccoons walking together down the marsh trail. The opossum is here. It's been here since about 1900s. This is an animal that doesn't do well. It's to the north of us because of cold. It's a wanderer, meaning that it doesn't really have a home range, and that's how it got here. Typically more southern than us, but it is here. Has been, as I said, for a good century. It has a prehensile tail, which we don't see. It's no fur on it. And so that's for balance while it's walking on logs like this. And it is a marsupial, so it keeps its little pups there in its pouch only for a couple of weeks, and then she puts them up on her back and they go down the trail. Generally nocturnal, will eat insects and small mammals. And then also garbage or carrion, dead stuff. It can feign death if it feels threatened, but generally it'll go run off into the brush for protection. So muskrat is here, rodentia, and we would have had beaver, but they've been long since extirpated from Massachusetts. They've been reintroduced to Mass, but not here on the Cape. So muskrats are, these are both photos at different times at present-day Colebrook Preserve, which was formerly known as Bank Street Bogs, again by my sister. They're great swimmers. They spend most of their time in the water. They'll do, like if it freezes over, they'll do like push-ups, they're called, which is where they'll push cattails up through the ice. They do make a den in the side of the bankings of marshes, and other animals can get in there and feed on them or use the dens. But and then they'll live under fallen logs. They are terrestrial, but they're at both freshwater and saltwater. So you'll see them out on the salt marsh. The Herring River, where it's salt, you'll see their trails and even see them as well. So they are here. And for one reason we'll get to in a little bit, dogs just like to kill them. When they see them, they just get a real frenzy they don't eat them, they just kill them. And I'll explain that more as we progress. So animals that we might think, oh, who cares? These are all ground squirrels. It's from the smallest, the chipmunk, who's got pouches in its mouth to store food. It digs tunnels down and creates a chamber and does cache. It's too small to hibernate, but so it does have movement underground and then will come above ground on a warm day in the winter. The red squirrel below it is our native squirrel. It's called a pine squirrel. And to the left of that, in the pine needles, those are holes plus some middens of chewed pine cones. And they can den under the leaf litter. And they'll also go down, I have pictures of them where they had a 3-level apartment. They had a tunnel in the ground, they had above ground nest, and then the dray up in the tree. So the one to the right at the bottom, that's actually a gray squirrel in the backyard at Chatham, and it's pink. It's not albino, but it is pink, so it should be what's called leucistic. It's a genetic anomaly. And so that's when animals become white. We had white turkeys around. I think somebody got a picture somewhere in the country this past year of a white eagle. So it's called leucistic. It's just a genetic anomaly. And then they'll also turn black, and that's melanistic. So that's another anomaly, which people might say, oh, they're black squirrels. Well, they're black gray squirrels is what they are. There are black squirrels, but we don't, although there are reports in one community in Central Mass that insists that they have them. They're probably just melanistic gray squirrels. And then the woodchuck, and he is the most prolific digger. And the reason I put 2 pictures in is because the one at the top right is the most common scene. You see its face that you'll find. And then the other one is him holding, and this is why this one is our true hibernator on Cape Cod. Again, the chipmunk doesn't hibernate, partially hibernates. They go into a torpid or torpor, but they don't have the body fat. With the woodchuck, they really feed as much as they can, and they spend as much as 6 months in hibernation. And so they have a very restricted diet, which is vegetables and plant matter, luscious, what is the word? Leaf. There's a word, I can't think of it right now. Sorry. It's luscious. It's you know, and then they like fruit as well. Rick Roth was a man that is a man that does creature teachers from Central Mass, and he had one and he loved bananas. So woodchucks are also called whistle pigs because they're like prairie dogs. They which are in the squirrel relatives. They alert. They don't alert like the prairie dogs, but that's what they do, is they alert in case of danger. But they like soft, well-drained soil because it's easier for them to dig. In the north, they are here, but with the rocky environments, they'll get under rock walls and stuff like that because they can't dig through the rocky ground. So they are here around hedgerows, open fields, and your front lawn possibly, and you'll know it if they do. And other animals will utilize, the benefit is that other animals will utilize their dens. And last on the squirrels, general rule of thumb, on the left is a conifer tree with a squirrel dray, the nest, and that's a red squirrel, pine squirrel. And at the bottom there, you see the midden under a white pine, classic red squirrel. And then to the right, there's in a conifer tree in the fork of a trunk. So it's up against the trunk and a branch right at the trunk is a nest. So this is leafy, and this is the gray squirrel. And then the hole in the tree is an oak tree, again in East Harwich. And you'll see it's chewed, and it's kind of large, the hole is, so it should be gray squirrel. A woman who's done a lot of work here tracking on Cape Cod, Diane Burritos, is in Maine. She says that it's the gray squirrel, I mean the flying squirrel, that likes to chew because she thinks that it gets, or she says mockingly that it gets claustrophobic. And so that leads to, yes, we do have flying squirrel here. Unfortunately, these are Getty images, but we have both actually in our literature. Again, the animals don't read the literature about themselves. We say that northern flying squirrel isn't here, but last year or a year ago, 2 years ago, a northern flying squirrel I saw directly at Nickerson State Park in Brewster. It was in the garbage container, got it out. It did its classic leap off the container to the tree, and then it scurried up the tree and looked at me, and it looked more reddish, as you can see it to the left, red in the tail, brown and red, little larger than the southern flying squirrel. At Nickerson for a long time, they're called what is it called? Well, they live in a home. They stay there, so they will stay like at Nickerson in the admin building. They're up in the attic. You'll find their little pellets and such. And so the little one with a 2 is that they're those are southern flying squirrel. And you can see how small the hole is because the southern flying squirrel is a very small animal. The uniqueness of this animal is the flaps. It doesn't fly, it glides. The only other mammal or the mammal that flies, and that's a bat. But these aren't bats, these are rodents. And if you look in to the left on the northern flying squirrel, you see the edge of the flap is kind of folded. This edge here, this hard edge, is called the patagium. And you can see how it's folded. So he's actually steering himself. And that's how they do when they look out off of a tree. They have to be off ground. They can't be on the ground. They can get on ground, but they can't fly. They have to get up a tree to soar. And they can look for danger, and they have a way of just kind of freezing and looking to see if anything moves, if they think there's something. And then when they do soar from the top of a tree, they can change the direction of their flight because of that patagium, which is really evident on the northern flying squirrel. They both have it. So they are here. Both northern and southern flying squirrel are here on Cape Cod, specifically at Nickerson State Park. So these kind of small critters might be boring, but they feed of the upper canopy of the predators. And most of our carnivores that we saw, the fox and coyote, feed on these small animals. They don't take larger animals as much. And everything feeds on, unfortunately, the meadow vole is like the bottom of the food chain, and just about every predator feeds on it. So that's hawks, northern harriers on the beach, fox, coyotes, the gray fox as well, red fox in the woods. So we have should be three different meadow voles, three different voles: redback, southern redbacked, and then a woodland vole. Their names indicate being in the forest, and then generally out on the beaches, out on the meadows is the meadow vole. Sometimes they're blonde. Below them, you see the chewed grasses of the high marsh, and that's what they do. They'll tunnel under snow and chew these trails. When the snow melts, you'll see all the sorts of trails, and you'll see them in your yard. And then you see cedar, black cherry seeds there by them. They're chewed. They're not chewed all the way through. They chew into them. And then the Norway rat was introduced. We didn't have rats. This was introduced in the 1900s, or actually 1700s. The black rat of plague was here in the 1600s. And it's possibly that rat that contributed to the loss of indigenous people in the Great Plagues of 1616 to 1619. Their urine, that's leprous, boy, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the words now. Spirosis, it's the rat urine was in the water supply. Leptospirosis, there we go. So it's we didn't have the rat, so we do have Norway rat, and they are here on Cape Cod in abundance. White-footed mouse is our native mouse. We also have a deer mouse, a meadow jumping mouse. Deer mouse is probably not here, but a meadow jumping mouse. So mice jump on or hop on top of the snow. They don't tunnel. They do get into holes like the tree, the basal scar at the tree that you see next to the white-footed mouse. Even though there's frost on the ground, it's active, and you can tell by chewed seeds. You can tell by what's the inside of it, and that's where they would live. So meadow voles tunneling, and mice getting into holes and cavities and such. And of course, house mouse was brought here as well. That's an old world mouse, and that's in our houses. Every old house on Cape Cod has got mice in it. So they do feed a lot of the predators. So they are part of it. They could do damage for us, of course, through our houses and through if you have vegetation and such. So on to our next small, and actually smallest. These are insectivores. They're getting beetles and earthworms. So the eastern mole, they do have eyes. They're covered by fur. They do have ears, but they're not external. And they have these big, almost like catcher mitts, and that's for digging. Their back feet are very small, but their fur doesn't go. It's almost velvety, and so they can go forward and backwards. Like if you rub a cat's fur, you rub it backwards and it keeps groomed. If you rub it forward, it fluffs up. So it's a restriction. So these moles, especially the eastern mole, the star-nosed mole, is a great swimmer, and that appendage there in the front actually has electroreceptors that can sense the electricity of other organisms. So it eats water, crustaceans and insects. So it's around the edges in soft, moist humus. And so it can tunnel, but it's really around the water. And then on the left top, you see this is soft soil. This was actually Wellfleet Bay Audubon. And that's an eastern mole, very close to the surface. They tunnel. And again, they're looking for earthworms and other assorted, they do have favorites, other assorted insects. The little northern short-tailed shrew, we have a masked shrew here too. This guy is even smaller than the moles and has eyes. It's not rodentia, both of them, they have 5 and 5 in their toes. Rodentia is 5 in the front, 4 in the back. or four in the front, five in the back, sorry. But they eat, they do come up, this one, the northern short-tailed shrew does dig its own tunnel, but generally like the masked shrew will use mole tunnels or under the leaf litter. And they're getting, again, the same insects. They can get, because they have a poisonous bite, they have a poison, the northern short-tailed shrew, it can get meadow voles, even though they're larger than it. But generally they're insectivores. And who eats them? Well, this guy. Short-tailed it was formerly called short-tailed weasel, ermine or ermine. This is at Nickerson State Park. This is a little guy, about 5 ounces, hence its name, short-tail, you see on the right. Weasels, dogs just have a real penchant for killing weasels, and that's what happened here. This was area 1, and if you look at the picture on the right, you see teeth marks. You see where the dog bit it, and it didn't kill it. And with the weasels are very fast, restless is what they are. They're very restless. And so this animal will go down into tunnels, and it's eating the moles and voles. So the moles and voles who are eating, the voles generally herbivores, but the moles are insectivores. And so he's underground eating them both. And then also above ground near wetlands. This is close to Flax Pond. They're well established there. And so there's one. This is, again, my sister took this. This is Wellfleet Audubon. This was recently, a couple of weeks ago. And they're kitten cute. If you see them in person, you just want to pick them up and cuddle them. They're just so cute. Versus like they have brownish, this one is more black, and they molt, become all white in the snow, but they don't do it so much here on the Cape because we don't get much snow. But I saw one, it was getting the road in Nickerson State Park, and first I thought it was a red squirrel, and I got close to it, and you can tell by its face that it was like a kitten. And then there's a picture from me many years ago at Chatham. This is weasel scat. I don't have a penny there to show you how the size of it is, but it's very small. But you can see that its fur and the twists in the scat are indicative of being carnivora. We also have long-tailed weasel, who's a little larger, maybe a pound tops. Long-tailed weasel can actually get short-tailed weasel. Red-tailed hawk can get both. Owls can get both. Coyotes and foxes can get both. This den here is at Salt Pond Visitor Center. It's at the High Marsh, and that's a long-tailed weasel. And most likely there was a weasel in this den while we went by. If you look at the sand on the right out of the den, you can see the part where it's packed down and almost moist. So he's kind of belly sliding out of the den and down to the water's edge. Of course, that Salt Pond is tidal, and next to this den is actually where there's a water seep, freshwater seep, that's always seeping water into Salt Pond, because Salt Pond was originally a kettle pond. So they're here generally around cranberry bogs and the such. This guy is here too along the beach. This is a prolific digger, and his tracks really give him away. It's on the beach. This is Coast Guard Beach, and then that was Try Island. The sand piled up. He was in there digging at the time I took this picture, and I left him alone. But it's, of course, a striped skunk. Skunks are mustelids, although they're thinking to categorize them in their families. But they are musty. They smell. They do make good pets. It's illegal in Massachusetts, but if you degland them, they still smell. Gentleman I mentioned, Rick Roth, Creature Teachers, it was called Double Stuff, his skunk. He did pass away a couple of years ago, and he did smell. He was just a real friendly, peaceful animal, but that's his nature. It smells. And the tracks there are actually at Salt Pond at the amphitheater in the snow, and I just took thousands of pictures. But if you look at his back foot, the big foot, it kind of looks like a bare foot. It's like, wow, it's a big foot. So I thought it was funny at the time, so I took it. He has 4 claws in the front, great for digging. He is a good digger. They like to make back hole entrances to their dens a lot. The foxes will come in and can take over a skunk den, and then a coyote can come over and widen a fox den, all because of conservation of energy, just like us. We want it easy. Skunks have terrible eyesight, but they have a great sense of smell. It's said that possibly they camouflage with their pelts, but that doesn't make sense because it's pretty obvious. But predator animals, or nocturnal animals, have predominantly cones cells in their eyes, which perceive light, and the rod cells perceive light, cone cells perceive detail and color. And so if I am a nocturnal animal and a predator, this animal would be very visible to me. And then I might consider the smell. So they do have anal glands that they can do little droplets and then actually spray. And again, back to dogs. Dogs just have a penchant for killing them, and they don't give this animal any chance to defend itself. They'll stomp, they'll raise their tail for us if they're agitated. They'll give us clues. They're actually very docile. They can walk right by you and not harm you. It's the dogs, if you're camping, that's what'll give you the problem, because the dog will go right after it, and its only thing it can do is spray. If you've ever you smell dead animals, it can be really kind of repulsive, almost to the point where you vomit, but it's not as bad as the skunk spray. And the reason is the skunk spray is a sulfur alcohol based. It takes a day to recharge it, so it only does little droplets. If it shoots it all in one shot, it's 2 glands, so it's like a double barrel shotgun. If it uses it up, that's it. It takes a good day for it to recharge. But what it does is it gets, especially with dogs, it's right in their mouth and their eyes. But for us, we absorb it through our nasal passage, our sinus cavity, and our eyes. And it's actually sort of acts like a barbiturate, where we become woozy, and we want to get away. We might smell like garbage that smells really bad, but it's like, oh yeah, we live with it. But when a skunk spray, we want to leave it. We want to go far away because it actually has an effect on us other than just being foul. And that's their defense. So American mink is here. They were actually introduced, they're here naturally, but they were introduced by Fish and Wildlife along the canal to combat the rats along the rocks, the sides, the revetments. And it's been successful because they're very good at getting the rats. They're an aquatic animal, but terrestrial, and need about 3 square miles or so, but they're in freshwater and saltwater marshes. They're in Chatham. I saw a sign of one at the cow yard one time. The way they can take down larger animal is in the same with the small. The little ermine they latch onto the nape of the neck, the back of the neck, and then they wrap their body around an animal that they can take larger. They can take down a larger animal. This only weighs about 5 pounds. I think it was. They're very, very small, but attractive. And the little white chin. That's one of the ways they give away. See the little white patch under his chin. Fisher is a success story on its own. It came back into the Northeast through overhunting and extirpation, loss of habitat, generally around the woodlands, trees. It likes continuous canopy of trees. It does go up in the trees. This animal has semi-retractable claws, so it can chase the squirrel up a tree and turn around and chase it right back down this tree. So it can turn its back legs like a squirrel does and climb down, race down a tree upside down. You see its paws. It's 5 toes, semi-retractable claws, dens. This is sitting on a log, and that's where it's generally hunting for chipmunks, squirrels, all small rodentia, rabbits. It can take larger animals. It can, if it's opportunistic, if the opportunity presents itself. And then the mother will actually take the kits up into a tree because the males might come along and kill the young. It's easily trapped. It was part of its demise locally. There's a very thick, coarse fur, but it's again, it came back into the Northeast, into Massachusetts, out onto Cape Cod, by its own doing, because here on Cape Cod, we've had a good century of regrowth, reforestation, and that's what's brought wildlife back to us, which was formerly extirpated and overhunted. Tracks are similar here to a fisher, but it shows, if you look hard enough, you'll see the webbing between the toes, 5 pointy toes, and the cluster, the way the 4 feet are grouped together. And then you're also seeing the tail drag is what's happening here. This is loping. This was in the afternoon at the D. Isabel Smith Conservation Area in East Harwich Bay Road. And they're fun. They're just gregarious animals. They play. The young will stay with the female. And whoops. They also do what's called delayed implantation. So the fisher will do this as well. They will mate after they give birth. They'll be giving birth soon, and they'll mate again, and it won't become impregnated for another year, though. And so it's just a peculiar thing about them. This is a stock image of otter. They have powerful claws and the webbing between their toes. They are a terrestrial animal, so they cover a great distance on land, going between ponds. The mink can do the same. Either stiff whiskers are for murky water and sensory. That's what whiskers are for in general. For all the animals, is their sensory. So if you ever have a cat or even a dog and you try to play with its whiskers, it generally doesn't like it because it's very sensitive. Doesn't have the sensory in the paws. I left this out about fox and canines. Their sensory is in their teeth. That's why babies put their hands in their mouths, because that's where their sensory receptors are. Their hands they're not coordinated and they can't figure it out. So everything goes in the mouth. And that's why with canines, they'll do that. They'll bite you, but they will bite you lovingly. And that's because it's more sensitive in their teeth. For this guy, it has a short mandible, the lower jaw, and so it has a great crushing power in its skull. It doesn't have a lot of teeth, but it has a tremendous power to crush. And it eats its food entirely. It just chomps. You can hear him chomp, chomp, chomping on fish. The tracks are pretty neat. Again, Sandy Neck, the Marsh Trail, one of the premier places to go track. And you'll see on the left is the otter movement, the otter jumping. And then the coyote comes afterwards. So the coyote tracks are fresh at the time of this picture. Out on Sandy Neck, I have pictures, I can't find them, but it's happened twice where I've gone easterly, so it's called down neck to the cottage colony. And when I've come off of Sandy Neck, it's a good 7-hour hike. I found fresh coyote tracks in my own footprints going the other direction. So it's very active for a lot of animals. For the otter, they're up in the high dunes as well. They cover the area. They, again, cover a tremendous area. They have these tissues, membranes for their eyes, their ears, so they don't get water in them. And they're just very friendly, happy animals, and they love to play. And you can see them in parking lots near marshes when we get snow, if we get snow. So we're down to this track is unmistakable. Been looking for this for a long time, and it came right to the house in West Chatham. And so the sign on the left is the gait, the way it walks, and no canine walks that way. This is a very particular gait that this animal does. And then the cluster of tracks, 2 from the bottom, that one print is without question who it is. If you look at it, it's not in the larger one, it's not symmetrical. The little on the left, the 4th toe or the 1st toe, it's the 4th toe, but is off from the right one. So it's not symmetrical like the coyote is. It does have a 5th toe, but it doesn't register. It's an obsolete appendage. And who is it? It's bobcat. So this was a February 2014, like I said, came down in the morning, looked out the kitchen window door, and I saw the tracks and I couldn't believe it. And I went out there, and on the previous slide, my bare footprints were in that, but I cut them out over here on the left. But It took me 3 days. I was doing process and elimination, trying to say, no, it can't be, but it did. It came from my sister's next door to the back porch, where a fisher did this one time, looking out the kitchen window, and oops, there's a fisher. And they come along the edges, so the edge of the deck, the edge of the house, because that's where small critters might be, the meadow voles, and any other small mammal or insect. Generally, the bobcats like to have fresh, and the same with the otter. They eat fresh food. Otter won't eat dead stuff. Bobcat might feed on carrion, but it can't be contaminated, meaning that it's not foul. In the snow environments, obviously it preserves, so the carcasses don't become foul, if you will. So bobcat is here. We know that one was found dead. What was it, in Wellfleet? They've actually been here historically. I met a gentleman 10 years or more ago whose grandfather did field studies. So I guess he was a biologist, field studies out on Sandy Neck in the 60s, and that all his study notes were dedicated by the grandson, donated to the town of Barnstable. And they were bobcats back in the 60s. And they've been seen by people. Generally, Fish and Wildlife doesn't like to acknowledge them because we'll go looking for them. But they are here. And it's whether their numbers are increasing or not, they're solitary animals. They stalk by hunting, and they are here though. How did they get here? They can swim, but generally cats don't like to swim. They came over the bridge. That's how they did it. So with that, I think I kept it in my time frame, maybe a little long. I hope it wasn't too fast for you, and you get some of this. This is the salt marsh. This is a high marsh in Chatham. This is a Conservation Foundation property. It's got the finest wildlife observation is here. But these are otters at play in the high marsh, and they left just mounds and mounds of scat. And when you see their fresh scat, it's just bones and scales. It's all fish. Smells a little fishy, that's all. But it's almost silver. It's gray, but it's battleship gray, but it's silvery. And it was just mounds of it here. And they just had fun. They were chasing each other around, scent marking their territory. And they can be out in the day. So many of the animals are considered nocturnal. And that's like with otter, it's because of us. And in the wintertime, it's not uncommon to see animals, raccoons, skunk, out during the day because of food sources. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed our webinar, and I will turn it over to Lauren at this time for any questions if you have them. And thank you.
Thank you, Todd. So the first question from Andrea is, how do you tell similar tracks apart, such as dog versus coyote or fisher versus otter?
Well, that's a good question. The fisher and otter are easy in the sense that if the foot webbing shows, which it most times does, but it doesn't always. But then also the belly slides or something, and they'll slide in the dirt as well. And then they'll tear up the ground. And the otters have great claws to tearing up ground. At Frostfish Creek, it was amazing. They just tore up a trail up and over the borrow pits from one side to the next. So the fisher are they have pointy 5 toes, 5 and 5, and they're pointy. And they don't show as much point like with a otter because of the claws. With domestic dog and coyote, it gets a little challenging. Coyotes are very symmetrical. If we went back to those two prints images, they're either round or very spear-shaped. If they're spear-shaped, you're going to see the two front claws of the two digits. That will register. With domestic dog, they don't walk in clear paths. Domestic dogs aren't worried about, unless they're feral, aren't worried about their next meal. So they don't think about conservation of energy. So they wander over here and here. Fox, coyote, their movements are very direct, very efficient. And if they start turning around in circles, it's because they've picked up on a scent. So when you see a large print and it's splayed out, meaning that the digits are separated, that's generally going to say dog. Coyotes are up to 60 pounds. Maybe they're getting heavier now because of the coy wolf, coy dog hybrid. But and then with little dogs, it's the if you're seeing all the claws, it's a domestic dog, because coyotes and foxes, their claws are getting worn down. They grow, of course, but they're out there in the wild and they're running on their feet. So if they're on roads, they're wearing their claws down. They're digging, they're wearing them down, so they don't register as much. And then with a fox, I didn't point out, is that red fox has fur on her feet, and they don't, if you remember those prints, you didn't see the digits. They don't register clearly. The chevron of the heel pad registers. So I hope that answers your question. It's also the surroundings. If you're in a place where there's a lot of dog walkers, it gets tough. You got to have an eye. But when you get the knack for seeing coyote, you see it in the way they walk and the shape of their gait, their clusters of tracks, and the shape of their prints. Okay, I hope that answers it.
Great. There's a question here about the rodents that are chewing wires in cars, and
Yes.
she asks, are there any particular critters who have a propensity for chewing car wires? And in accordance, and she goes on, in accordance with new environmental rules, the wire insulation in newer cars is not petroleum-based plastic, but soy-based. So is this more appetizing to the rodents?
Probably. I didn't know about that, but they're chewing, and it's chipmunks. That's the most common getting in your cars because it's warm, and you'll see their evidence that they've brought some nuts in there and they've been hanging out for a while. They can bring stuff in, which chipmunks do. They bring things in, and other animals will do that. Will bring like into dens, and they'll bring vegetation. Like with chipmunks, they like the cattails is one thing they'll bring in. So chipmunk is the most common for that in your garage, because that's where they're living. They're scurrying about in your garage and out the doors. My dad's house, they're in and out all the time, and they just chew. This isn't related to petroleum, but the tar actually of pine tar is something that a lot of animals, squirrels, will eat. And of course, sapsuckers, birds will eat that tar, but other animals will eat the tar, the pitch. So why they chew the wires, I'm not sure. They're rodents, they chew. They have enameled front teeth. That's why they're yellow, so they're hardened. And when they bite, they're always sharpening their teeth. And they're just chewing. So I don't know what food value they can get. They can get insulation and stuff to make their little den, but I'm not sure why they chew the wires, but they do. And it's most likely it's chipmunk.
Well, lots of folks putting up thanks to you, Todd. A wonderful presentation. Thank you everyone for participating today, and have a wonderful rest of your Saturday. Okay, we have one more message.
Another thank you. Thank you.
Just another thanks. There you go.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Have a wonderful day.
Same to you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.